Welcome back to the Jason Rantz Show. When Janavi Kandula mistakenly ran across the street as an incoming patrol vehicle was speeding to an overdose call, unfortunately getting hit and killed in the process, Seattle cop and union vice president Dan Auderer was called to evaluate that officer driving the vehicle. Now, afterward, on his way home in his patrol vehicle, Officer Auderer called the president of Seattle Police Officers Guild to talk about what just had happened. It had obviously become a union issue. But unbeknownst to him, his body cam automatically turned on and caught an out-of-context portion of this call, where he was mocking city lawyers from the city of Seattle for the excuses that they would inevitably make in order to get out of paying Kandula's family in a settlement. Now, it sounded like he was mocking her death. And media, for the most part, only played this small snippet of a larger conversation.
Yeah, just write a check. Yeah, $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value.
Now, of course, there was a lot more to that conversation, including just the context. But in the end, thanks to leaks from the city, interference in the investigation, a whole lot of activist pressure, and a media environment that kind of seemed like they were looking for a kill, the interim police chief fired Dan Auderer. Joining me for an exclusive interview, his first since this issue actually came to light, is Dan Auderer. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Did your termination by interim chief Sue Rahr catch you off guard?
From a 30,000-foot view, yes. I would have never thought in any part of my mind that I would ever be terminated from the Seattle Police Department for anything. It was not only my career, but it was a way of life for me. Mm-hmm. And it never crossed my mind I'd be in the position to be terminated. And in this case, this particular case, no, I was absolutely shocked that occurred.
How did you find out?
It's fairly simple. I was ordered to come into headquarters, and when I arrived at headquarters, I was fired.
Now, that's not usually great news when they call you into the office, right? I mean, sort of unexpectedly.
Yes, it was unexpected, but I still did not expect it.
What did you think was going to happen when you went in?
I thought I was going to be disciplined.
Explain that. So for folks who don't realize how this works, obviously any kind of punishment can be anywhere from a day without pay, taken off the force, or termination. You were expecting the high end of the discipline.
I was expecting the high end of the discipline due to the media coverage this received. The allegation itself normally doesn't ever have a real high threshold for discipline. You know, you don't see officers for professionalism getting 30 days, 20 days, even 10. It's normally letter of reprimand to a few days off if they have a long history of this.
Yeah.
Discipline is handed out over long periods of time. Say, if you have an officer that has professionalism problems, you'll get a letter of reprimand, then you'll get a day off, then you'll get 2, then 4, then it builds up. It's progressive.
Yeah. Before Chief Adrian Diaz was effectively pushed out, what was your understanding about how this would go?
I believed I was going to get 30 days off.
Why did you believe that?
Like I said, due to the media coverage and...
Well, I meant, why that specifically? Were you told this? Was there essentially an agreement, for lack of a better term, between you and the department or the city?
Not me, but likely, I was told it was likely going to be 30 days off, yes.
Okay. And that's coming from just your union representation. Even though you are the vice president of the union, you still have representation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the expectation from them was that this was 30 days, presumably because that's what they were told.
Yes.
Throughout the process, up until this moment, you're going through the motions, you're meeting with investigators from the Office of Police Accountability, you're recounting everything that you could, and beyond some of the leaks, which we'll talk about it in a bit, was the process followed the way it's supposed to be followed?
No, absolutely not. From the very beginning, it was not followed. It was unlike anything I have seen at the Seattle Police Department, actually.
How so?
I don't want to say the Seattle Police Department. It was unlike anything I've seen from our accountability partners.
Okay. So what was different? How should it have gone, and why do you say it didn't go the way it was supposed to?
Well, at the very beginning, I don't recall the timeline, but maybe 5 or 6 weeks before the video was leaked, I was made aware that somebody had noticed the video and a complaint had been filed. At that point, I naively, trying to follow the rules, wrote what's called a rapid adjudication letter. Rapid adjudication is a mechanism that officers use if a complaint's been filed, they know they did something, and they're willing to take reasonable responsibility for it so everybody can move on without a lengthy investigation. Mm-hmm. That was put into the police contract a few years ago at the city's request, and we were trained and told to use it. And so I tried that. I also wanted the city to be able to, if there was anybody that asked questions, and even at the time, at the very beginning of it, I had no clue what was going to happen with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine what would happen with it. I thought it was going to be something I was going to have to take my lumps for and move on. So I sent that. That was denied within, it's comical, less than 15 minutes.
Really? So,
yes.
I mean, was it even opened and read?
I don't know.
Right. I mean, that's how quickly
yes.
it was rejected. And
yes.
in this case, we're talking about Henry Betts, who's the director of the Office of Police Accountability.
Gino Betts,
excuse me. Let's go back to the very beginning when this all happened.
Okay.
You obviously, January 23rd, specifically, you were the guy who goes down and does some of the, tests for impairment in cases where an officer gets into an accident. This is a normal procedure.
Well, it's not only officers, but
anyone.
Yeah. And it's not just a collision. It's going to be major injury,
mm-hmm.
some major property damage maybe, and death.
So you get that call January 23rd about the officer getting into this accident, and it's very clearly an accident. You can see from the body cam or from the dash cam footage what happened. You meet him at the West Precinct?
Correct.
How did that go? Again, everything was the way it's supposed to?
I arrive and there's already counsel at the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So the chances of me even being able to be put in front of the driver were pretty low when I saw counsel was there. But this is just me surmising what his attorney was thinking. This officer's not impaired. I think it's good that somebody go in there and see.
Yeah.
I was told not to interview. No interviews, no questions, but you can evaluate.
Who, when you say you were told, by whom?
Defense counsel.
Okay. So you go in, you do your general testing, what you would normally do. You found no impairment.
Zero impairment.
So it sounds like that was pretty quick, right? That was just going through the motions, going through all the testing and everything that you would do, and then that was it because you're not doing the interview.
Yes, I'm not doing any interviews. The testing can last longer if I start detecting impairment, mm-hmm. but it's obvious the driver's not impaired. And this isn't unusual. It could be a metro driver. It could be a dump truck driver. It mm-hmm. could be anything where if I arrive on scene and there's a fatality, it could take me 3.5 minutes to realize this person's not impaired, or that investigation can drag on for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And to include interviews. So it wasn't an unusual way of doing it. It was just the way it's done.
So you're done with that. You get into your patrol car. You're done for the night. You're going home?
Correct.
You then call the president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild, Mike Solen, for I think, obvious reasons, right? I mean, this is now a union issue.
Correct.
How did that conversation go? Before the body cam was turned on, what was the context leading up to some of the clips that people have heard?
Well, you're speaking about getting help to officers if they need it. You have to arrange wellness. You have to arrange for attorneys. You have
mm-hmm.
to start thinking about how this could affect them long term. That's the union's job. It's their representation. Mr. Solen was, like anybody would be, was horrified at what happened. And he was repetitive. My God, what's going to happen? Does it ever stop? Those types
mm-hmm.
of things. And it really does never stop in our profession.
Yeah.
So He went on to say many things. You know, what are they going to say? What are they going to do? What are these attorneys going to possibly say? And that's how the whole context
Seattle's
of
attorneys.
Any
or in general
litigator, yes, anybody that's going to litigate this case, not specifically Seattle, but any attorney. And we operate in an arena, and we see these things happen all the time. And I don't mean just the collisions, but the way the legal system plays out. It's there's the real world, and then there's the legal world.
Yeah,
and we constantly trying to make fair out of an unfair world are constantly lamenting the fact that these two different worlds exist and very often have two different realities.
Yeah, and that's an important piece of all of this because you're looking at everything through the lens of an officer, but also an officer because of your union background and just doing this as long as you have, I think since 2008 with SPD.
Correct.
You know, you also know the legal side of things and how things get twisted by all different sides because they have different interests in mind versus what you as an officer is there to do, which is find out what happened, why it happened, who was involved for the most part. In the middle of this conversation, your body cam turns on, unbeknownst to you.
Correct.
How do you think that happened?
I may have performed a U-turn. Another vehicle may have gone by, and if their camera was on, mine would have come on
automatically. That's how the system works.
And I had just had this installed.
Yeah, this is a new system.
New
for
system.
This
I hadn't
vehicle.
even taken training on it.
Yeah,
and or that I can recall. I think I asked somebody that had taken the training come out and show me how to use this new camera, but that was fairly recent, and I don't know how it turned on, but it did.
Yeah. So depending on what it is you're doing in the car, depending on who's driving by at the time, it can trigger turning on the camera automatically.
Correct.
So have you thought about, and you probably, this is all you might think about, just the randomness of that had you not made that U-turn or maybe turned on your lights, that this never would have happened?
We would not be sitting here right now.
Yeah. When you realized that it was recording you, how quickly did you start to formulate, oh my God, this is going to become something?
I didn't at the time. I thought, okay, well, one side of that conversation wouldn't sound good because you have to remember that this is a free-flowing conversation of two people. We could take a phone call of anybody in this office that they make today and take one side of it and build whatever we want around it. That can be done. I naively thought, well, and this is my problem. This was my fault. I thought, I'll just tell them what I was talking about and everything will be okay. Because like I was saying, living in these worlds, we live in a world where we are expected to do very hard things and make right decisions, even when it's difficult. So I thought, I'll just tell them. I had no clue it would do that.
Were you mocking her death?
Absolutely not. I spent too much time and seen way too many things to mock anyone's death, and I'm horrified that her family's continually pounded by this story. It weighs on me, and it's something that will never, ever go away in my, I would say, soul.
Yeah. When you think back at that conversation, you know, we've heard a lot of folks in defense of you and just in defense of first responders in general or people who work in high stress situations, basically saying there's gallows humor that's used as a result of seeing traumatic incidents day after day after day. Is that a valid point that folks are making in this context?
It's very valid, and it's also very healthy. It is going on right now in patrol cars, ambulances, ERs, law offices. Newsrooms. It's going on right now as we speak. You can either, and this is one of the great things I miss about being a Seattle police officer, and I didn't want to be anything but a Seattle police officer. It wasn't being a police officer. It was very attractive to me. Mm-hmm. I've had a long love affair with Seattle, and I wanted to be a Seattle police officer. And
why? Why a Seattle police officer? Why not a Bellevue officer or a Pierce County Sheriff's deputy?
It goes back to when I was a child. I was down at 3rd and Pine. My first memory of Seattle police officer is a kind of a big, burly-chested officer walking with his stick, spinning his stick, buttons unbuttoned on top of his blouse, mustache. And he simply reached over and touched my head and said, "Hey, kid, I was waiting for the 71 right outside of the Bond." And from that moment on, I knew what I was going to be. And I didn't know the path I was going to take to get there, but I knew it. And it went hand in hand with, like I said, a lifelong love affair with Seattle. Everything about it I loved. From the trees to Green Lake to the food to the neighborhoods. It's a city of cities. Absolutely loved it and treasured every minute of service that I was allowed to perform.
Well, so how does it feel listening to a lot of the coverage, reading the coverage that essentially never talked to you, don't know your background, don't know why you became a cop, but inferring all these things, that you're a crooked cop, a bad cop, someone who doesn't care about the community, despite the fact that you've been doing this as long as you have been doing this?
Well, that was done on purpose by many in the city, by some in the city, I should say, not many, and that'll be proven. It was done specifically as an attack on my union activism.
How so?
In an attempt to weaken the union, if they could take out a vice president for something like this, it does weaken, in their minds, the union substantially. And it also, unfortunately, chills the rest of the police department.
Mm-hmm. I know you're saying they, and I know you can't get too specific because there is a tort claim that is filed. We'll talk about that as well. But when you say they, do you mean people within the department? Do you mean City Hall? What are you talking about generally?
I would talk about our accountability partners.
OPA,
and CPC.
CPC, which is the
Community Police Commission.
Community Police Commission. Well, let's talk about that aspect then, because obviously someone reviewed the body cam footage, which is normal. These things just get viewed. You hear that happened. You don't want to go through an investigation, so you self-reported, essentially, saying...
I didn't self-report. That didn't happen. It's me saying, okay, I'll take some reasonable punishment.
And that's what I mean. Okay. You came forward and said, yeah, this is what happened. Let's go through this rapid adjudication period because I know that this is going to be seen as unprofessional. I'll take the punishment.
Correct. That's exactly what I tried to do. And my intent was... punishment was secondary to me, to having the ability of the PD, the police department, to explain it. And normally, they would have to remain silent during an investigation. So I thought, well, this is going to be more helpful if we can just rapidly do this, and they'll be able to explain it, and we can move on. Naive of me.
When did you actually start the investigation process? When did they start reaching out to you saying, okay, let's sit down and let's talk through what happened?
It was around this time last year you receive a notice that a complaint's been filed. And at the time, the OPA has 30 days to classify what they're going to investigate. They decided to investigate professionalism. After it was classified, which is about 30 days, because you have to keep in mind that everybody was aware of this for weeks before that video leaked.
Yeah.
Once that complaint was classified, that evening I started to get media inquiries, and then I knew something was wrong. And what they were telling me was flooring.
What did they tell you?
Your name specifically has been leaked, and people are asking for that specific video. And I was shocked because I was like, "What? This complaint was just filed. Since when do we do this? Since when do we leak names?" And it became evident very quickly that it was an attack on the union, and we're going to prove that.
When you're talking about leaks to the media, just from my reporting and my investigation into this, I mean, clearly Seattle Times reporter got wind of this, a blogger, a local blogger got wind of this. Were there more than those two?
Yes, you called.
I did.
Yeah.
People had said that you had leaked this information to me, and as much as I wish that were the case, that was definitely not the case.
No, and once naively, again, I probably frustrated you at the time.
I'm always frustrated, so you're fine.
Because if you recall, I told you I can't tell you anything. That puts me in administrative danger. I have to follow the rules. And that was naive. The rules were not being followed, but it certainly wasn't me. I was on the east side of the mountains teaching a class.
Mm-hmm.
Totally
when you
removed
found out about this?
when I found out about it. Totally removed from the city or anything that was going on. Going and doing things that I love to do. Teaching and mentoring officers on impairment investigations and traffic safety. And this rose in one single evening, and everything changed from that moment on.
Well, from that moment on, I mean, obviously you knew something had happened. You knew it was leaked. It had to have either been leaked from OPA or from SPD, obviously. I believe it came from OPA via the CPC. But did you know at that point that it would snowball the way that it did, or did you just think this was going to be a headache that you're going to have to deal with, but probably not as big as it ended up becoming?
I had no idea how big it would become. I mean, I know why now, but that was on purpose. That drum kept getting pounded, and it was specifically rolling it out all the time through the city. So I had no idea. I thought it was going to be a headache, and we were going to move past it. And I thought, well, no laws were broken. I didn't, all the things that you obviously do not want to do as a police officer, I didn't do. So
how did the investigation unfold? Because it seems pretty simple, right? I mean, you're not denying anything that's on the video. You're providing context, certainly. So that means you did, and we know you did interviews, or at least one interview as part of the investigation. But beyond that, what happened?
I did 3 interviews.
Some of those transcripts were leaked.
They were leaked. I don't even think they were leaked. I think they knowingly handed them out.
Yeah.
During an open investigation. Again,
Who's they?
The OPA was handing them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was shocking. That just does not occur in the midst of investigations. I mean, I don't know how you conduct an investigation if after an interview, the transcript of that interview is immediately made public.
You say you know why. It's tied to damaging you because of your connection to the union.
Correct.
But at the time, what did you raise with either the union itself, Chief Diaz at the time, or even City Hall?
I personally could not do much of anything. I was ordered to be quiet. Unfortunately, others weren't ordered to be quiet.
But they're supposed to be quiet.
Supposed to be. Yes, they are. It was like being held down and hit.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do anything about it.
How frustrated were you at that point?
The darkest chapter of my life.
How so?
The damage it does to your psyche, especially, like I said, when you spend a substantial amount of your career trying to make fair out of unfair world. None of it is fair. It's really hard to settle that in your head. And you have to move through the suffering.
And it's not just you that suffers, it's family as well.
My entire family.
How did they handle this? Obviously, they felt the stress that you felt and the anger and frustration. I imagine they were supportive, but did they understand why this was all happening?
They did not have an understanding of why the city behaved in the way it behaved, in which they behaved. Mm-hmm. And I say they. I don't want to. I still love the city. Yeah. I do. I truly do. So I don't want to. It's not a blanket statement about the city of Seattle. It was very targeted by our accountability partners.
The accountability partners play a big role in this because obviously they put together the findings of the investigation. The first draft, that wasn't even a draft, it was the findings that were put out by Betts, basically saying, yeah, it was a professionalism issue, and that was that for the most part. He then has a conversation, it sounds like, with the Seattle, who did he speak with originally? The Inspector General. They had some sort of conversation about what was in the findings, and then the findings were changed.
They were changed over a weekend.
Yeah,
Yes.
just 2 days.
Yes.
And it said the opposite, it sounded like, of what it originally said, which was there was no finding of bias policing, which is what you ended up getting hit with, somehow bias over age, which I don't understand ageism when we're dealing with someone who's under the age of 40, but originally said no bias, 2 days later, bias.
Correct. And I think it's important that I was never there. So any sort of bias, I simply was never there. There was no enforcement.
At the scene of the crime.
Yes.
Or of the incident.
Yep. Never there. So I couldn't, there was no possible way, because I didn't even know who this was. And when you conduct an investigation, especially a fatality investigation, there's only a couple of questions you ask, because my job is to get quickly to my job used to be, to get quickly to the driver. It was a human being hurt? Was a human being killed? Oh, okay. Male or female? That's the only information I need to know. So it's not like you arrive at these scenes. Many times you see what happened because people are there. Or normally the driver is a block away, 100 yards away, removed from the scene. In this case, it was in a precinct. But that bias portion, if you look at my statement that I wrote that night, the last line of my statement says, at the time of this statement, it was a line about knowing nothing about the victim.
Yeah.
Except approximate age
yeah.
and sex.
Yeah, and in fact, you got the age wrong when you were in that phone call.
Correct. I didn't know anything else. I mean, if it wasn't so tragic, it's a good case study. But I knew nothing else. And yes, the age was wrong because I didn't know anything about it.
Had the investigation not been changed, and it was just about the professionalism, you would never have expected to get a termination. Why would you still hold that expectation when clearly something was done to change into, the scarlet letter for cops, which is to be found to have committed bias policing? That's not something light. And not to say that professionalism is a light conduct charge, but that's incredibly subjective. Lots of officers, unfortunately, get hit with that, even though it's certainly nothing dramatic that had occurred to lead to that.
No, it's the most common. Officers are disciplined for professionalism more than any other.
You had a tone in your voice and someone didn't like it.
Correct. Or, you might lose your temper and say something to somebody. Professionalism complaint, and you get disciplined for that.
But why did you not think that this was, at that point, more serious to the point that it was going to lead to termination? Why at that moment did that not connect with you?
In the end, the bias component was not upheld. That was overturned.
Yeah.
Again, being naive, I thought eventually the rules would be followed. I thought, okay, at the end of this, somebody's going to follow the rules. And it just didn't happen.
Were you treated fairly, or do you believe you were treated fairly by Chief Diaz?
I don't know if there was... I was not treated fairly by the police department or the accountability partners, but there was no chance for fair treatment. The investigation was ongoing. Mm-hmm. You don't treat anybody in any certain way during an investigation, an internal investigation, especially like this one. So I couldn't tell you if I was treated fairly or not. There really wasn't anything to be fair about.
Do you think that the outcome would have been the same had it been Chief Diaz and not the interim Chief Surar?
I don't know. I truly don't know now. I'm done being naive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she calls you in, or someone calls you into the office. She take us through that conversation. I mean, was it a very quick conversation? Was it drawn out? Did you have questions? How did that go?
It took 7 seconds.
Really? Who was in the room?
An assistant chief, and it was very quick. Mm-hmm. And I left. I went home.
So she just told you and you left?
No, she did not. Chief Rahr was not there. Who
told you?
It was an assistant chief.
And it was just the assistant chief. It wasn't an assistant chief with Surar.
No, just an assistant chief and myself and Mike Solen in an office.
Is that unusual?
I don't know. I've never been fired from the police department, but
you've dealt with people.
I've dealt with people that have, but no, it's pretty much the way it goes.
She sends out the letter explaining to the officers, not naming you, but it was obviously about you. And that's how I found out. Like within, I think, 17 seconds maybe of that email going out, people started reaching out to me, and they were pissed. I had not heard from officers so upset about something in such a short amount of time ever in covering policing here in Seattle. Obviously, you are very well respected, and on top of that, the implications of all of this. But as you started to realize, wow, I just lost my job, a dream job with Seattle Police Department, you get home, what happens next?
Well, the frustration of leaving, I was in a little bit of shock, but by the time I got into my car, walking out of headquarters, the media was already reporting it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter in these instances because my feelings don't matter. Like, that's immaterial to what the police department has to do, what they believe they have to do to weaken the union. But that was frustrating. It didn't even give me time to call my family.
So they found out, or could have found out before you even talked to them.
They did. They found out on the news before it was so rapid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you get home, I imagine after something like this, while you probably appreciate the support that your family's giving, you probably just want to be siloed, just be alone.
No, I had a group of friends come over. But we're going to leave all of them out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What comes next for you outside of the tort claim? Just as someone who wants to be an officer, I can't imagine this makes it easy to get another job somewhere.
You know, it's not going to be easy, no matter what kind of job I go get, whether it be in public safety or not. The way the city conducted itself has rendered me likely almost unemployable.
Mm-hmm.
I may be able to get another police job somewhere because there's understanding within that community on what these things are. But I truly miss it. Every single day I miss it.
Thinking about everything that's happened and the reaction that people have given just externally, it's obviously going to be a little bit different than what officers are going to say to you and express to you. What concerns have they expressed?
They're concerned it could just simply happen to them if they upset the wrong person. I've heard them say, geez, I'm glad they're not. This happens every day, this type of mocking and humor. If you don't do it, you have to stuff things deep inside, and you're going to end up committing suicide or becoming an alcoholic. And
which unfortunately is a high number of law enforcement that fall into both of those categories.
Correct. So what you do is one moment you're at a horrific scene, something that the average individual would look at and remember and lament, and it would resonate with them. With officers, especially experienced officers, you're doing that over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
It never stops. So what you do is you might get in a car with your partner, or you might over lunch. There's going to be some humor. You talk about what happened, and you do that, and I can understand how somebody that's inexperienced would say, well, that would make you callous. It doesn't. Quite the opposite. It makes you very sensitive to people. And it makes you a student of human nature as well, which is another part of the job that I really miss. But to get that out of your system, to move on to the next call, you have to do that. And I don't know why we're now pretending that it doesn't occur, because it's very well known. They make movies about it, TV shows.
Well, there's going to be a portion of the public who know, but will pretend otherwise because of a whole host of reasons. A lot of it, especially coming from the activist community, is that this is something that they can use to go after not just you, but policing in general. And of course, that's precisely what it is that they have done. There are some people, I imagine, who haven't even thought about that and need to hear it directly from someone who has experienced that and understands what it's like in positions like this. Most people don't have any clue. They will never go through any moment of their life seeing some of the things that you end up seeing.
Yes, no, that's very true. And I'm all these officers here in Seattle they're willing to shoulder that burden, but there's got to be there has to be some understanding. It's like, okay, we know this happens, just don't want to hear it, and I understand that, and that's my problem. Like I told you, it hurts for this individual's family, it really does. And I have a big, wonderful family that I love very much, and I can't imagine the horror of it.
Are they being exploited?
I'm not gonna go into that. That would, yeah.
I heard.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I heard within 10 minutes of this, an officer say this was the last straw. Doesn't want to work with SPD anymore. And, this is all happening, not in a bubble, but it's happening at a time where morale is down. Staffing is obviously down. They're not making the recruiting goals, hitting the recruiting goals that they thought. In fact, quite the opposite. They've reversed some of their goals because they're not going to hit them. What does this do to that situation? And if there's an officer right now listening, we have a lot of officers who listen, who cannot believe what happened to you. And they're starting to question why it is they put that uniform on each and every day. What's your message to them?
Well, first, I can't believe what occurred because I never thought I'd be in that position. I worked so hard and loved it so much. And it's obviously not going to love you back. But being in this position is a position I never thought I'd be in. What I would say to my colleagues is what they're doing is noble. However, don't let this stop you from doing what's right. You're going to have to move forward, find something within that profession that you can become great at and excellent, and move forward and do that. There are bright days ahead. It can't be dark forever. So don't stop doing what you're doing because it's not really about me now. I'm gone. It's about the next person that calls and really needs something. You're going to have to show up and be excellent. And that's the challenges and that internal challenge of policing every day. If you're going to do it well, you have to challenge yourself to be excellent. Because you're going to be at your best when somebody is at their worst. And worst is relative. Like I said, you can go to a horrific scene and then an hour and a half later, you're going to a noise call. Mm-hmm. But you have to be able to provide excellent service when you're walking up after what you just saw. That individual you're contacting for this noise complaint that's upset that the upstairs neighbor's playing the stereo too loud, you have to be excellent. And I would challenge them to do that because somebody needs their help. And just because the way this played out, I don't want an officer to think that they can't provide that excellent service. So work hard, provide excellent service. And in turn, maybe someday there'll be some grace when there's some bumps in the road moving forward with the agency. But don't cry for me. You've got a job to do. That would be my message to them.
I hope you become a cop again. You are a cop. I hope you get another job as an officer again. Do you think that this experience can make you a better officer?
That's yet to be determined. There's a possibility it could make me less confident, which a lack of confidence in a productive police officer is not good.
Yeah.
The confidence has to be there. So I don't know yet. I mean, I would love to police again, but my dream job was the Seattle Police Department. They thought attacking me because of union activism was more important than that. But it was my dream job.
Should the city have fought harder on your behalf? You had relationships. You were obviously, because of your union role, you're dealing with folks in City Hall, whether it's the mayor's office or his staff. I mean, you have those relationships. Did they fight for you?
I don't know, because I'm removed. Like I said, naively following the rules.
People talk.
They
Cops
do.
talk all the time.
They do, but it's I just don't know yet. I mean, I know a lot of what occurred, but not out of the mayor's side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, mayor's got a city to run.
You've now got a tort claim, $20 million.
Yes.
Perfect scenario. Would you ever come back to Seattle Police Department?
I can't say I wouldn't. I mean, it's such a large part of who you become, and those people become your family, and being removed from that is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, extremely. Because when you hear the names, or I read about shootings, and I see the photos, and I know who that is, and I know what they're doing, and I know I could do good if I'm standing there. I know my experience could bring things to the agency. That's what hurts. So I can't. The way that the city behaved, I don't want to say the city again. Like I said, it's one portion of the city.
Sure.
Is reprehensible. But it's also not going to damage my optimism for this city in the future. We have some really exciting things that we could have done, that we can do with public safety in Seattle. It's a progressive city. New ideas are not immediately dismissed usually. It was going to be fun. It was going to be a fun last 10, 15 years of my career, but now I'm on the outside looking in.
Last question for you. What would you say to the public, not the officers who have a different lens that they're viewing this through, but to the public who looks at this and on both sides, they either say this is nonsense, a good officer was railroaded, a system that I don't even know can be truly reformed. And then you've got the folks who say you got what you deserve. It's wrong what you said, even if it was in jest, even if it was mocking the lawyers. We expect better of officers. You've got a public that has two completely different views. I think one is, more reflective of the general public than the other. But what's your response to them?
Once again, if we go back to speaking about people know it happens, but they don't want to hear it, I would tell them that. And I would also, one of the things I really miss, and this can go straight to the this feeds into what the public may be seeing, but what I miss most is your average everyday call that you might go to an individual's house, apartment, condo. And it's not unusual to have somebody say, "I'm sorry I had to call you." Stepping out of that patrol car and telling myself, "You're going to give excellent service. Here's another chance to give excellent service." And when they say, "I'm sorry I called you," and you can utter the simple words, "Oh, don't apologize for calling me. I'm at your service. What can I do for you?" I miss that. And people don't think of policing. They think of policing as fast cars, mirrored Ponch and John on TV, or yeah. It's not what I enjoyed. It was that everyday interaction with people I've known for a better part of 2 decades on the streets. Knowing and actually loving the city in which you work has its frustrations, of course, especially in policing. But I don't want that. Don't let optimism slip away, is what I would tell people out there. The city's going to rally, and so will this police department. I, unfortunately, am not there, and I truly wish I was. But don't lose optimism, folks. There's good days ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic message, one that I would understand if you didn't utter, given what happened, but that you did says a lot about you and your character. I think SPD is worse off without you there, but it was a mistake that they made and a mistake that we'll see if they learn from. The biggest concern is that they might not learn anything. But I'm glad you're willing to tell your story so people can actually at least get all sides of this, not just what has been filtered through the folks who have been leaking this to media outlets. So Dan Auderer, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to The Jason Rantz Show.